If ever we needed a reminder of how unstable and how dangerous this world that we live in is, and how vulnerable our Caribbean region is, it is now with us, facing a multiplicity of threats. We don't need to look any further than the menacing vessels, military vessels from the United States across the Caribbean Sea, including what is reputed to be the world's largest warship. These are not times of pirates anymore. This is 2025, and we have cause to be duly concerned. Because even as that is happening, one of the most dangerous hurricanes for the 2025 Atlantic season is bearing down on our brothers and sisters in the Northern Caribbean. Melissa. We are facing, my friends, an extremely dangerous and untenable situation in Southern Caribbean. And as a people with a tragic history of being subjected to centuries of big power, orchestrated genocide, terrorism, and warfare, and as a small state, we have invested tremendous time and energy and effort in establishing and maintaining our region as a zone of peace. Peace is critical to all that we do in this region. And now that peace is being threatened, we have to speak up. I believe that the time has come for us, therefore, to be able to ensure that we do not accept that any entity has the right to engage in extrajudicial killings of persons that they suspect of being involved in criminal activities. As I said, we stand for the rule of law. And we believe that if there is other intelligence available that would cause you to take action that is an immediate threat to you as a nation, then you have a duty to share it with us. But on the face of it, conflating law enforcement with military action is a dangerous step, as Kerry Simmons advocated a few weeks ago. We equally do not accept that any nation in our region or the greater Caribbean should be the subject of an imposition upon them of any unilateral expression of force and violence by any third party or nation. If there are conflicts and disputes that are in need of resolution, then the place that they need to be taken for such resolution is the United Nations organization. And the methodology that must be deployed for the resolution is one of negotiation and peaceful actions taken in order to ensure that we can settle disputes. Barbados has always been that place, and that is why we were the location for the opposition and government in Venezuela to sign the pact here a few years ago, because we are friends of all and satellites of none. And I say so comforted that this has been the position of every single government of the country since independence. The violent actions that this buildup has led to needs to be the subject of dialogue. And I have said before, almost every war in the world in history has been ended by dialogue. So let us have dialogue to prevent the war from starting rather than to stop it when it has started.
Greetings, beautiful people. Once again, welcome back to my YouTube channel. And in today's video, we're going to look at this video whereby it's a great bold speech from Mia Mottley, the PM of Barbados, and she is majorly asking for the Caribbean countries to unite. Well, I'd love for you to watch this video up to the end, and then I'll be back with a few discussion. But remember, if you're coming across my channel for the first time, don't forget to like, subscribe, and also comment. To my returning subscribers, my returning viewers, I have to say thank you so much for the love and support. So let's watch this video, and then I'll be back with a few points.
Over the course of these 7 years, our community has perhaps seen more challenges than we have ever seen since attaining independence. Indeed, some may argue more challenges than we have ever seen since the famous September 1947 Montego Bay Conference, which called for a regional integration movement such as we have to be able to allow us to more effectively navigate our development journey. We live in a very different world from 1947. But if ever there was a time for regional solidarity, it is absolutely now. And Secretary General, I thank you for outlining some of the concerns that we face. When I addressed the heads of government meeting in Barbados a few months ago, I made the point that this was a time for us to lay bare our hearts and to be able to speak frankly to build the institution that we want. I note that immediately as I finish speaking, there is going to be a song from Ramon Watson, from that great Caribbean icon, Jimmy Cliff. And the song that they've chosen is That I Can See Clearly Now. But I wouldn't mind if they added to that not just the power of vision, because I think across this region we have that, but the power of trial and effort. And there is no better song. I call myself, in fact, a Jimmy Cliff girl. There is no better song than You Can Get It If You Really Want, but you must try and try. You'll succeed at last. It is against that backdrop that I ask us to reflect on a few things today. We met and understood that our region, like every other region across the world, is suffering from the vicissitudes of cost of living issues that are making it more difficult for ordinary Caribbean people to make each day and to go through each day and night. And the question for us as heads of government and heads of state is, how do we make it easier for people to sleep? And how do we allow them to be able to undertake that task of taking care of themselves and their families in the most easy of ways, in spite of what has been triggered globally through geopolitical issues and wars and conflict and disruption supplies. We have determined that our agricultural commitment, 25 by 25, even if we have not met it fully, has put us in a better place than we were 5 years ago. But what we must not do is to stop, because if we try and try again, we'll succeed at last. Against that backdrop, a number of persons on a trade delegation week before last went to Boa Vista in Brazil to begin to open up the trading relationships that will allow us also to access food and meat at much cheaper prices than we are currently doing so. It is true that the actions of the United States government in their promise to impose tariffs on all Chinese-made ships created a catalyst for movement in a way that we could not find on our own. And if anything, we must thank President Trump and the U.S. Trade Representative for that. Mercifully, there was a stay of execution on the imposition of that tariff a few months ago. And I want to thank the Caribbean Private Sector Organization for working with us as heads of government of the Caribbean community. An amazing 500 members of the private sector went on to a Zoom call, showing that when our vital interests are truly challenged, we know how to find unity in this region. If we cannot open up greater supply routes, if we can increase our domestic production, cognizant, however, that we are constantly at risk of the climate crisis, decimating that which we are trying to do in terms of open field agriculture, then we can begin to recognize that we do have the capacity to feed ourselves more. The bottom line is, however, that there are still too many gaps. And the major issue of logistics, I am happy to report that there are at least 2 CARICOM member states that are now in the process of looking to acquire cargo planes to help us overcome the very difficult prospect of the movement of goods within this region. Equally, I anticipate that at this meeting at Montego Bay, we will have the presentation on the inter-island regional ferry from the private sector. And at this point, it is up to us to determine whether we have the political will to finally ensure that we can democratize travel through ships yet again in this region, knowing full well that with the federal maple and the federal palm, there were examples of it many decades ago, and that we have allowed ourselves to become purely at the mercy of air travel without recognizing that as islands in the Caribbean Sea, we have the ability to reach each other in good time and at cheaper fares than if we only use air to connect our region. Tomorrow, we shall also receive the completed work on the CARICOM external tariff CET and the rules of origin. And I want to thank all at COTED and Community Council for teeing it up. We did think that you were taking a little long, but it is finally here. The political judgment that has to be made by heads now is what other items that will not compromise regional production that can have the bond rates continue to be reduced so that we can see more progress on the reduction of cost of living, particularly of food and sanitary items. But this meeting will not only see these matters. We have come before our region to speak specifically of other things that are threatening our existence as a region. We live in a world now where fake news, regrettably, is a key part of all that we have, and where the improper use of AI can sometimes stoke great fear and panic among our citizens. It is about time, therefore, that we as a region come up with a CARICOM validation mechanism in the absence of the providers of those platforms not taking the action to validate truth any further. And if we fail to do so, we put seriously at risk the stability of our democracies. In the last 2 weeks alone, my government in Barbados has had to put out as clear fake news, one that sought to ban President Trump from our country, one that sought to impose on Barbados travel advisories that didn't exist. And it is almost as if this is a daily exercise now for our countries, because those who have nothing to do, as we learned as children, the devil finds work for idle hands. We need our own CARICOM blue tick to validate truth in this community. In addition to that, I ask us equally to look at the issue of where we are with respect to citizen security. Today, the heads of government of the Caribbean community met with the heads of judiciary, and we did so as an absolute item of respect on the part of both groupings. It was a historic meeting, and it was one that recognized, as your Chief Justice in Jamaica put it, that it is possible for the judiciary to meet, remain independent, but not isolated from the communities in which they operate. This is so critical, not just for the development of Caribbean jurisprudence, but also for the stability of our democracies. There is no country in this region that is not facing some level of citizen insecurity. And regrettably, I've said over and over, we pay a high price for the Second Amendment rights of the United States of America's citizens. But whatever the cause, the reality is this is where we are. If ever there was a time for us to cooperate, as we discussed today, on matters pertaining to this, and Jamaica has put on the table a regional justice and security framework cooperation agreement, which I believe the rest of us are ready to engage in, because it is consistent with the Needham's Point Declaration of 2023 that was settled by the Caribbean Court of Justice Academy and the judges of the region. It is consistent with the George Bridge Declaration of November 2024 that was settled by the CARICOM heads of government, and it is absolutely needed by our citizens if we are to see safety be the primary concern of our people, from Jamaica and the Bahamas in the north, to Belize in the west, to Barbados in the east, to Guyana and Suriname in the south. And of course, underpinning all of that is that wonderful island chain of the Eastern Caribbean states. We have a duty to our citizens. It would be remiss of me not to salute Winston Anderson, the new president of the Caribbean Court of Justice, and may I say the president of my own Court of Appeal, Final Court of Appeal in Barbados. And you will forgive me, having been the one who was the chair of the preparatory committee for the establishment of the Caribbean Court of Justice. You will forgive me if I now make yet another appeal to the citizens of this region to allow their governments to know that there ought to be a singular purpose for the Caribbean Court of Justice to be truly the last court of appeal for the states of this region. We are aware that there are some countries that have the requirement of referenda. But this, like everything else, ought to be the subject of public education. And if we can so do, then I believe we can finally start to move the needle generationally for us recognizing that this ought to be our final court. Our reality as small states is not only to be taken into account when dealing with the WTO and the need for special and differential treatment, or the international financial architecture that requires us to move away from the reality of assumptions with historic per capita GDP and not understanding the vulnerability of our countries as small states. But our small, vulnerable states are also to be taken into account with respect to our Caribbean jurisprudence and for how we treat to the issue of citizenship security, particularly as it relates to sensitive matters that will see persons who have been charged continue to move in our communities with impunity and taking action against other citizens with impunity. Let me, however, also reflect that over the course of this last 6 months, one of our major concerns was the stability of Haiti. The world really needs a check on itself when it comes to Haiti. If ever we doubted that there were first-class and second-class citizens in the eyes of the world, don't doubt it anymore. In Haiti, more people were killed last year, in many months of last year, than were killed in any other country on earth, including those that were at war and the subject of military conflict. And in spite of that, and in spite of the promises, the world has been unable to move beyond the promises and the platitudes that would bring help to the people of Haiti. I'm not only talking about the loss of life. I'm talking about the displacement of citizens from their homes. I'm talking equally about the food insecurity of the people of Haiti. And let us be real. Our capacity as a Caribbean community has limits, purely because of size and capacity financially. We can help as best we can, as we must. But the world is what is needed as well at this point in time, beyond simply the deployment of troops from Kenya, without the requisite support in terms of machinery that is necessary to ensure that those Kenyan troops and others are not sent like lambs to the slaughter along with the members of the Haitian police force. That Haiti is trying as best it can
to be able to withstand the assault by gangs is to be commended. But at the same time, it is not enough. And what is required more than ever is for a truth talk, both within the context of what is possible from Haiti's perspective, but equally what is possible from the international community. And I fear that the absence of that realistic conversation will continue to mean that ordinary citizens will have their lives put at risk. And if not their lives, their limbs, and if not their lives and limbs, their ability to live as dignified human beings. The pace at which progress is needed must be expedited if we are not to see more and more people suffer. At the same time, in the last 6 months, we have had the issue of the spectacle of near difficulties with the border security situation between Guyana and Venezuela. I thank Prime Minister Gonzalez yet again for continuing to play a serious role along with Prime Minister Skerrit in ensuring that we could have the principles of the Argyle Declaration continue to be respected, even if in a tenuous way. And I recognize that this is going to require our continuous vigilance as we go forward, because we are all committed to seeing the Caribbean as a zone of peace at the level of the state and equally at the level of the citizen with respect to citizenship, security, and insecurity. We have unfinished business. The Caribbean Educational Transformation Commission must be established as a matter of urgency. For all of us continue to adhere to an educational system that is not fit for purpose for our citizens today. And we need to make those changes informed by data, informed by evidence. But the longer we take to put that commission in place, the longer we take to make the changes that are necessary to give our young people the best possible chance. Equally, we are required at this time to recognize that there are actions outside of this region that will demand our solidarity. I speak specifically as early as this week of the actions of the European Parliament with respect to the failure to delist countries like Barbados and Jamaica, who have come off of the Financial Action Task Force list for more than 1 year, but for whom we remain on the European Union's enhanced delegated list, along with countries like Gibraltar and UAE that are the subject of their opposition. But because of a technical mechanism by which they remove countries, Barbados and Jamaica continue to suffer at the hands of the listing process when we have been deemed to be fully compliant with all of the obligations required of us from the Financial Action Task Force. It is wrong, and if it was the shoe on the other foot, if the shoe was on the other foot, we would be told how to find ways of having our Parliament change the manner in which we address this issue, rather than grouping all of the countries in one basket to be the victims of any opposition on any country in spite of the progress made by our countries. I raise these issues because, as I said at the beginning, if ever there was a time for us to celebrate solidarity and to be able to work together, it is now. And I am not daunted whatsoever by our failure to get it in one go. And that is why I said that at the beginning, I am a Jimmy Cliff girl. We can get it if we really want, but we must try and try. The CSME was the subject of a dedicated conference when we left Montego Bay on the last occasion. And it resulted in the St. Anne's Declaration in December of 2018. But there are some difficult issues that we must confront. And we have heard one Prime Minister and one leader of the opposition question the validity of this entity within recent weeks and months. But if we are to be honest with ourselves and with our populations across this region, and we must start the public education process, it is largely because of our inability to find an appropriate mechanism for the funding of the CARICOM Development Fund. And even if every country in the region put money in it, it would still not be enough to finance disadvantaged countries, disadvantaged sectors, and disadvantaged regions, which are the consequence of any single market and single economy. It is against that backdrop that I've asked that we look at taking some of the excess regional liquidity that exists and finding a way, with the cooperation of those who can help us put the guarantees in place, so that our region can start to finance our own development. There are only 2 countries in the region who provide interest rates in excess of 5% for savings. The majority of CARICOM countries have interest rates that are below 3%, and therefore we are in a position to be able to offer the opportunity for the participation of CARICOM bonds to our citizens at rates of return that are competitive with private commercial banks, but are still lower than the lending being offered to many countries on the international capital markets. At the same time, in the last 6 months, we have done significant work to advance for the first time a regional debt swap initiative. My own country, Barbados, has now done 2 debt swap initiatives, one for nature and one for climate. In both instances, we have increased our capacity in respect of the nature one for marine sustainability trusts, and with respect to the climate one for the construction of a new South Coast sewage treatment plant, without increasing our debt by a single cent. And that is simply through the use of the Regional Debt Swap Initiative. The President of the World Bank, the President of the Inter-American Development Bank, the President of the Latin American and Caribbean Development Bank, and the President of the Caribbean Development Bank have all come together to lead this region on the Regional Debt Swap Initiative. And so attractive has been the proposal that countries like the Dominican Republic and other Central American countries have indicated a desire to be part of this Regional Debt Swap Initiative. In our own case in Barbados, we have determined that our next debt swap will not be for climate, but will be for the social sectors. And we look forward to other countries in the region joining us, such that this Caribbean Community region will lead the world in having the first regional debt swap initiative globally. In addition, may I remind you that there is also the natural disaster clauses, which ought to find primacy of place in all of our international and regional financial instruments. Our country just went to the capital market and raised $500 million US, and included in those bonds are natural disaster clauses and pandemic clauses, ensuring that for the first time, if we should be hit, somebody knock some wood for me, please. If we should be hit by a hurricane of a certain threshold, that we are in a position to pause the payment of our debt, both principal and interest, for 2 years, and not have to do what befell the people of Dominica, who had to look for debt payments immediately after Hurricane Maria, instead of being able to focus on shelter and food for their citizens at the very time that a hurricane has hit. And the notion that we are safe from a climate crisis can be immediately debunked, because week by week, with the latest being the tragic circumstances befalling the children of the United States in Texas with the raising of the banks of the river, of the Guadalupe River, reminding us that none of us can escape the hands and clutches of the climate crisis. So my friends, I ask us, please, to recall that there is much work to be done. I have not spoken to you today about the necessary work of the reform of the governance of this community and the funding of this community, because I believe that the heads of government must confront it and not believe that we can continue to wear the garbs of 20 and 30 years ago, as we live in a world that is completely different today. And we must find the boldness, I believe our preacher told us today, Bishop Pitkin, when you said to us, let us have the boldness to move thought into action. Because without that, our region will not be ready for the defense of small states. It is my view that in the absence of an international rules-based order, and we are seeing it being threatened day by day, in the absence of an international rules-based order, countries such as ours will find it difficult to survive. And this, my friends, is the first real threat that we have had since becoming independent nations. The notion that others may want to conquer again is not beyond their imagination and not beyond our reality. But equally, the price of sovereignty is no longer simply that which we have started to do in the first 2 or 3 generations since independence. The price of sovereignty now extends to our ability to control our information and to generate our content. We have to be able to own our own satellites and not be the victim of somebody pulling them on us because they do not like the position we took on a war across the world somewhere or someplace. We have to generate our own content because it is only us who know our reality, and we cannot simply be the victims of other people's judgment as to who we are and what we stand for. And if we don't do these things, then we will fail to recognize that the new armada and the new flotilla are not the ships that came and brought our forefathers here under protest. But in fact, the new armada and the new flotilla is that which will control our mind. And we know what Marcus Messiah Garvey told us about emancipating our mind from mental slavery. If ever there was a time for us to listen to these entreaties, it is now.
Once again, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm your host, Tyra Reactions. Remember, if you're coming across my channel for the first time, don't forget to like, subscribe, and also comment. To my returning subscribers, my returning viewers, I have to say thank you so much for the love and support. And to my new subscribers, I want you to feel much welcomed on board. Now, that has been Mia Mottley, the Prime Minister of Barbados, whereby we know she is bold and brave, and she is majorly fighting for the rights of humans and the black people in general, because the many cases we've seen, it's about black people being oppressed. Now, in these videos, you will understand that she is majorly calling for the unity amongst the Caribbean communities and Africa. She has asked the Caribbean countries to strengthen their relationship with Africa. Reason being that, you know, Africa is a continent that's full and rich of minerals. So, if the Caribbean can unite with Africa, then we are bound to witness the greatness of unity in this world. Africa will be untouchable. The Caribbean will be untouchable. Now, we can talk of what's happening right now in the world. We can see the amount of divisions that are being caused. The world is full of chaos. The world right now is in chaos. That is this country bombing this certain country, this other country bombing this other country. I mean, lives are being lost. There are other countries that are being bombed. There are other countries that are being fired at just for supporting this certain country. But well, we all know that the United States has been quite a bully to other countries, not just in Africa, not just in Caribbean, let's just say all over around the world. The US has been a bully for quite some time, and it still is a bully, because recently we saw they arrested the president of Venezuela. I mean, what would you do if you heard that there is this president of the United States or other country just arrested the president of your country? I mean, how do we call that if not bullying? Look at what has happened in Haiti. War. Lives are being lost. Innocent lives are being lost. Properties are being destroyed. All of these wars, they are dragging our countries backwards. Look at what happened in Burkina Faso. There have been several major attempts on the life of Captain Ibrahim Traore, just for being a good leader. And sadly, due to the divisions that we have here in Africa, we don't have unity. We don't love each other. Most African presidents, none of them stepped up to support Captain Ibrahim Traore. None of them are in support of Captain Ibrahim Traore. That brings us to this question. Who are these people that we vote into power? What are they doing for us? Why are they oppressing us instead of protecting us? And what I always do is I blame us for these misfortunes. I blame us for this because we vote for a certain person, for a certain politician, not even a leader, a certain politician, because this politician speaks the same language as I do. Because this politician comes from my area. We vote like that, thinking that these dirty politicians, they'll care for us. And once they step into power, they forget about the people who voted them in. They forget about the promises they made to the people. They forget that they are there to serve the country and the citizens. These people doesn't care about us. They doesn't care about the well-being of our country. They steal from us. They oppress us. High taxes. They fail to build schools. They fail to build hospitals. They fail to provide the required medical facilities in the hospitals. But they never fail to buy high-end mansions and luxury cars. They don't fail to keep on touring other countries for their pleasure. They don't fail to take their kids abroad for good studies. I mean, they can use all of these resources, all of this money in building these things that our countries are lacking. But look at the amount of ignorance. Look at the amount of selfishness. Look at the amount of greediness that these politicians have. Who are we supposed to turn to? Who are we supposed to turn to? So guys, we are to be blamed. We are to be blamed. Because the criteria that we use to vote is not working, and it has been oppressing us for quite a long time. Look at what happened to Patrice Lumumba. They used black people to chase him. And these black people, they carried their guns, their spears, chasing after their fellow black man. At the end, what happened? What were they promised? And where are we now as countries, as black people? Where are we? We are still being oppressed, even in our own countries. Nobody can stand for us. Nobody can be there to protect us. Nobody. When a white person comes to our country, he struggles to communicate. And we can create excuses and room to enlighten this person. This person is not versatile with our cultures, with our food, with everything in our countries. But we create excuses for them. We make them feel welcomed. We make them feel loved. But what's happening to our fellow brothers and sisters, mothers, fathers in the diaspora? What's happening? You fail to pronounce a certain word properly, they laugh at you. Look at what ICE agents are doing to our fellow black people. They are breaking homes, marriages. Students are being dragged out of schools. So guys, it's high time we join hands and support Mia Mottley in her message that we should unite. The Caribbean should unite. Africa should unite. We should strengthen our relationship between Caribbean and Africa. Well guys, I'll leave the rest for you because I can talk and talk and talk and talk and not get tired of talking about this topic. So I have to appreciate you guys for the love and support you've been showing unto me. I've been your host, Tyrell Reactions, and I'd love for you to consider subscribing to my channel if you're yet. So until we meet again in my next video, peace out and one love.